What's up, guys? It's Josh from Soul Studios. I'm so excited today to be back with the review of the AudioScape DA-3A. So this arrived at an interesting time. I had just started a mix called Off Balance by Amalia Fleming. And being that this song doesn't have a traditional drum track, I actually started with the lead vocal. I do that sometimes if it's an acoustic-based song. So we're gonna hop in. I'm gonna show you exactly where I use the DA-3A on this mix. You know, anytime you get a new piece of gear, there's a certain amount of inspiration that comes with it that's fun, especially if you're in the middle of a project where you can really see yourself using it a lot. And that was definitely the case here. Just a little bit of backstory. I talk a lot on this channel about my love for Verimue compressors. And of course you see like the whole middle rack here, basically that's what it is. But what I haven't really talked about before is probably the most used compressor that I use as far as the number of instances across a mix, and up until now it has been plug-in versions, is an LA-3A style compressor. I love it on acoustic guitars, pianos in particular, strings, electric guitars for sure. So like I said, I started with the lead vocal in this mix, so I'm going to show you what I had going the moment that the DA-3A arrived. I had already built out my lead vocal chain, and although an LA-3A can be great on a vocal, Bob Clearmountain, who's the GOAT, of course, has mentioned that he has used it at times on lead vocal. And so obviously it's capable. But for me on this song, with the timing of when it arrived, I had already built out a sound that I liked, which you can see here using the power strip, retro power strip for the tube preamp and EQ. The compressor was out. Not even really compressing with the RS-124, more of a tone thing, and then really doing the compression with the Retro 176. So this vocal has a very intimate storytelling kind of approach to it. And there are some parts that are very subtle that I needed a good bit of top end. So we're at 16K doing a boost on the power strip for that. And what I do a lot of times with a vocal is I'm not EQing it to where I'm really concerned with S's or consonants, because I'm looking for the overall energy and the vibe that I need. And then I'll go in with de-essing or automation or whatever and dial back anything that may be a little bit harsh. But I'm not going to sacrifice the overall sound and energy I want over a few consonants that I can just fix with automation. So this is where we were when the DA-3A arrived.
I tried on every mask that was handed to me. They don't know who I am, but they know who I should be.
So, as you can already tell, amazing singer, makes my job a lot easier, but a little bit bright on the consonants, right? And let me show you why I EQ'd the way I did this line at the end of the verse here.
Being something I'm not.
That particular line, it needed that top end to do what I wanted it to do without trailing off too much or getting lost. And so, since I already had my vocal chain here, I thought, well, you know, the DA-3A has this cool feature where you can use this high frequency knob to help it focus on just the high frequency. So when you get it, this would be your default, where it's just going to compress like a standard LA-3A would. And then if you turn this all the way up, and you can experiment with variations in the middle, it's going to emphasize the high end. And so I really liked it in limiter mode for this. But listen with the DA-3A in and pay attention to the gain reduction meter to see the parts that it engages on.
I tried on every mask that was handed to me. They don't know who I am, but they know who I should be. I played the part too well. It seems that I forgot, lost my sense of self, being something I'm not.
So you can see it when there's no high-end information there that's poking out, it's not doing anything. Which, having said that, there's an overall box tone to an LA-3A that brings things forward in a nice way. I think sometimes because it's not a tube compressor or whatever, that maybe gets overlooked. But it's doing a couple of things here that I liked. It's bringing the vocal forward in the mid-range in a subtle but yet still significant way. And I'm going to dig in a little harder here to show you what it would sound like if you were to more aggressively basically use it as a de-esser. So let's do that.
I tried on every mask that was handed to me. They don't know who I am, but they know who I should be. I played the part too well. It seems that I forgot, lost my sense of self, being something I'm not.
So the thing I love about that is that it's different from a lot of software or traditional de-essers. And this is actually going to be my main de-esser moving forward, because as you heard there, when you dig in, it doesn't give a lisp to the singer like it does when you overdo a typical de-esser. So it's almost like a really nice multi-band compressor that you've just focused on the high end. So that's where we started. Added it into a vocal sound that I was already really happy with, but took it a step further and then also made the job that I had left to do a little bit of automation on those consonants and S's much easier. So right out of the gate, this thing has already found its new permanent place in my workflow on lead vocals. Okay, so after that, there are stereo finger-picked acoustic guitars that are the main rhythm instrument of the song. So they sounded like this. So anytime I have stereo main rhythm instruments like this, I want to make sure that it's got the right energy to carry the rhythm of the song, the main riff of the song. And also I want to make sure they're balanced so that things don't sound weird left to right. So a couple of things that help with that on the DA-3A, you have the option to link. So first let's get back to the standard high frequency here. And so what I did here was actually went for the limiter, which is something I do often when I want the acoustics to be a little bit more aggressive. So especially with a finger-picked part like this, it would be really easy for it to get lost because it's a little bit darker tone and a little bit softer transients. So let's hit play here and see what we get out of the DA-3A on the main acoustics. I love what this is doing with the link feature, especially when you have two instruments that are playing the same part that are doubled. It does something really cool to the stereo imaging that really focuses it in a desirable place for a main set of instruments. So, of course, there may be occasions where you unlink and sometimes that's a little bit wider sound, but this is doing really something cool with the stereo imaging. So I could see myself with any time there's a song that has doubled acoustics or electrics or something that's the main riff of the song, that I would link those and watch this. Like, it's very common when you double track to play that second track a little bit harder or louder because you're playing along to another track that you're hearing. And so in order to kind of hear them both in your headphones, you tend to play or sing a little bit louder on a double. So check this out. I'm going to experiment with the stereo adjust and show you what you can do to kind of fine tune left to right tracks with that. And where I could see this being really like even more useful than here, and I really like what it's doing. But if you had a piano where the low end was a little bit more pan to the left and some higher notes were coming on the right hand or the right side of the track, it'd be awesome to be able to not only focus on the high frequencies a little bit, but the stereo to compress that right side a little bit harder. So you've just got so much room to work with here between the link and the stereo adjust and the high frequency. It's really versatile to have something where you can have all these really useful extra features but still have the tone of the original is awesome. And to have the switches on the front, you don't have to deal with connecting anything in the back or making any switches in the back. It's just awesome. So, all right, let's commit those and then we'll move along like I did with the rest of the mix. Let's go to a piano like I was talking about and see what we can do there. I will unlink it first and have the high frequency at the standard position. And we'll start from there and see what we can get. So by turning this, the right side stereo adjust up, I'm essentially saying I want to compress this side harder. I like starting with linked still in general. It just, again, the imaging is just so beautiful on it that more times than not, I find myself going with that on stereo instruments. Now let's try to also use the high frequency and see if we can make it focus more on just the highs. All right, with notes that are very sparse like this, I love being able to extend the sustain. It's one of my favorite things about the LA-3A on a piano. So let me go back to the track without compression. Like most piano instruments, virtual instruments or stereo mic piano, a lot of the right hand or the high end is going to be more in the right side of the track. So you could unlink. So let's unlink them and just dial up the peak reduction on the right hand side. And now let's set them back the same stereo link, and then we'll just use the adjust to compress the right side harder. is just beautiful. And my wife is a modern classical composer, and her album was one of the most difficult that I've mixed because not having vocals and not having traditional drums and the piano being the main instrument, a piano is difficult to compress because a lot of times you're not really trying to color it, you're not trying to dirty it up, you just want it to compress, but still have that percussive element, have all the beautiful overtones and the sustain. And so I can't wait to work on more of her music in the future with this because this is way better than anything I was getting out of software. And I was primarily using software compression on her first EP for piano. So here we are again. We're at the third instrument of the mix, and I've already found another permanent home for the DA-3A. So I don't want to spoil the closing thoughts of this video, but this thing is blowing me away and has been so useful so far. So let's move along and see what else we can do here. So the acoustics in the verses are finger-picked that we did earlier. In the choruses, they're strummed and they switch to pick. So naturally the tone is a lot brighter. So what I did here was take advantage of the high frequency to help dial back some of the difference between the tone of the finger picked and the strum. So let's check that out. Here are the dry acoustics without compression. So the stereo adjust is just so useful because you can have your peak reduction set the same, and then essentially up the middle is your default position. As you dial back to the left, you're going to be reducing the gain reduction on the channel that you're doing it on. And if you dial it to the right, you're going to be increasing it. And of course, that will have an effect in the overall volume. And so the great thing about that too is that when you have stereo tracked doubled parts, I don't always like to EQ and compress them exactly the same, even though that can be useful sometimes, but a little bit different EQ and a little bit different compression, and now all of a sudden they sound wider. So again, so useful, able to focus on the high end a little bit more to help soften the pick attack on those and to better balance them as a stereo pair. Okay, next up we have strings. This song was a joy to mix because it's real strings. You know, a lot of times you get programmed strings when you're hired to mix a song. I know Mike, who produced the track, has been using Musiversal a lot to hire real string players, and that's awesome. So we have some cellos and violins and double bass, I believe. Usually with strings, I want to maintain dynamics because part of the excitement of going to the orchestra is things being played very soft and then these huge explosions of sound And so I try to keep that as much as I can within the context of what works in the song. So let's put the DA-3A across the string bus here, and we'll try a few things, see what we like. I mean, that's exactly what I want. And the thing I love about an LA-3A style compressor is it's compressing just where I want it, and it's grabbing those parts, but it's doing it in such a musical way that you can really get away with. I mean, when it peaked, it was probably between 5 to 7 dB of gain reduction, but it's not so heavy-handed. And so a lot of times with strings and pianos and stuff like that, I don't want tubes and a lot of transformer color. Even though, like I mentioned before, there is a mid-range transformer color in the LA-3A that I love, but I just find it to be so useful across so many things, and especially having a stereo unit like this. So I literally just set it to limit and, you know, basic starting point, and it's pretty much doing exactly what I want. That's what I love about the DA-3A and why I don't mind taking the time to use the hardware on multiple tracks, is because it's just so quick to dial in. I just love using this style of compression on so many sources, and from the moment this thing arrived on this mix, I mean, what I'm showing you here is exactly how I used it when I got it, and then I'll let you hear the whole song at the end. It just couldn't have come at a better time, and I think really inspired me and made this a better mix than probably what I would have done otherwise. Okay, last but certainly not least is electric guitar, and this has some big strums that come in on the final chorus. Electric guitar is one of the main places that I like to use this style of compression. Again, that mid-range forwardness that happens with the transformer really lends itself to guitars. And I think with these, they come in, they're kind of a big moment building in the final chorus. So I think I'm going to start with compression, try to leave a little bit more of that initial attack in so that it doesn't clamp down quite as hard as the limiting mode does. Since they are just whole note strums, I think I'll try to get it to extend out the tail a little bit, but let's see what we get here. So as you can tell, if you wanted to, you could really clamp down on that initial attack and just bring out the sustain. That's not what I want to do. I like the sustain, but I want to back off a bit and try to find some common ground there where we're still letting a good bit of the attack come through so we get the impact, and then sustain out the tail so that it fills that space until the next drum. So that's unlinked. There's a certain kind of movement that I'm liking with that. We'll see if it sticks, but everything else I've really focused with the linked mode to have a real solid rhythmic foundation here. And so with these, especially I've got some symphonic chorus on them from the SPX 90. I may want that little bit of variation. There's a little bit of movement with it that's cool because of course each strum is a little bit different. And I'm gonna link it here, see if it's better or if I still like unlinked the best. Yeah, I think unlinked for this one. And the cool thing is when you're using the DA-3A on all across the song, like I am here and like I will do moving forward. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm happy to review this, but I'm not using it all over this song just to demonstrate it for the purpose of the review. This is exactly how I mixed this song. This is everywhere that I used it. And this is how I use LA-3As in my normal workflow just up until now. It's been plugins. So let's commit the unlinked here. I like that better. Just a little bit of variation and movement, which is cool because when you're using it all across the song, you can pick and choose the things that you want to have a certain focus that linked brings, as opposed to a little more variation, a little more width, like we're going to do here on these electric guitar strums. All right, let's listen to a little bit of the first verse. I want to let you hear how the DA-3A performed on the main finger-picked acoustics and the lead vocal. And then we'll jump to maybe the second chorus or the bridge or something to hear strings and pianos and all that stuff.
I tried on every mask that was handed to me. They don't know who I am, but they know who I should be. Played the part too well. It seems that I forgot, lost my sense of self, being something I'm not. It seems like everybody else knows me better than I know myself, than I know myself. Even the gentle blow of the wind throws me way off balance, way off balance. I wonder if I wander to the edge of the earth, plant my feet in the dirt. Will I find what I'm looking for? It seems like everybody else knows me better than I know myself, than I know myself.
Well, there you have it, guys, the AudioScape DA-3A. Thank you so much, Chris, and everybody at AudioScape for giving me the opportunity to do this review. I did want to say a little bit about my history with AudioScape. I just, through pure luck and searching on Reverb, around 2017, 2018, came across my first AudioScape units. I believe it was the original G-Bus compressor, the opto comp, and the 76A, and reached out to Chris and ordered those. Those were the first pieces I was able to check out. And it's just been so cool to watch them continue to grow and expand. And I just couldn't be happier for them. I love the fact that they're making things, like it says on their website, handmade, one at a time, in Daytona, Florida. And it's just cool to see a team that everybody seems happy to be there and seems to really be proud of the work they're doing. It's just been fun as a fan and somebody that found them just randomly really early on to see their continued growth and success. So congratulations, AudioScape. I think you've knocked it out of the park with this one. And the last thing I'll say to people that have watched the channel for a while There's been a lot of reviews that I've done on tube compressors and pretty heavy-handed units. And my thought always was that there was a bigger gap between those and their plug-in counterparts, and a lot of them didn't even have a plug-in counterpart. So early on in my journey of expanding outside the box, I went for pieces like the Retro 176 and the RS-124 that would give a really big sonic imprint. That would give me something that I was not having the most luck finding with plugins. And with an LA-3A, and a lot of you watching this may have felt the same, you don't really think of it as a big sonic footprint. You don't think of it as a heavy-handed compressor. And that's right in some sense, but getting this unit has made me realize I really wish I would have gotten this sooner because again, it's not this massive tube thick sound, but with how much I like to use LA-3As across a mix, this is making such a huge impact on my workflow, on the overall quality of my mixes, of the end result, that I'm feeling kind of foolish for thinking that plugins probably had this dialed in pretty good. And don't get me wrong, there's some decent options out there, and I did a lot of A/Bing while I had this. But just running through the DA-3A, that mid-range box tone that you're going to get from the transformers, is not something I'm finding in the plugins. And even once you get into the compression and the limiting, the way that it grabs, sure, there's some decent plugins that are going to give you something in the ballpark, but this is another level for me, and I really wish I would have gone this route sooner. I really do. So, all right, I've talked enough. I hope the DA-3A spoke for itself through this song. If you would take a moment to go follow Amalia Fleming and Mike Meiers. Amalia was the artist on this song. Mike was the producer. Really enjoyed working with both of them. They're both based in Nashville. If you're around that area or would have any interest with working with them, I think you should definitely connect and look them up. All right, I'll be back again soon. Thank you, AudioScape. Thank you to everyone that took the time to watch. It means a lot. I appreciate it, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.